Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is JAMB Tutorials. In today's video we are going to continue with our series on Wuthering by Emily Bronte. Wuthering by Emily Bronte. In the last video I stopped at chapter 16. Today I'm going to continue from chapter 17. Please subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed. Click on the like button and share the video to your friends. Chapter 17. Isabella escapes from Wuthering Heights. In her flight, she had a lot of falls, consequently sustained some bruises on her face and arm. She missed Nellie in the Grange and persuaded her to order the carriage and take her to Jimerton and get a servant to get some of her clothes from the wardrobe. In the Grange, Nellie tried persuading her to stay, but she refused and insisted Nellie does as she has asked. Nellie asked a servant to get her clothes and ordered a carriage that would take her to Jimerton. Then she goes on to bind up her wounds, including the deep cut behind her ear. Nellie again tried persuading her to stay in the Grange, but she refused, though she would love to stay. She said Heathcliff would look for her in the Grange. Besides, his brother, Linton, hasn't been kind to her since she married Heathcliff. She narrates the last incidents that prompted her escape. Hindley wanted to kill Heathcliff with a gun, but his plans failed because Isabella revealed everything to Heathcliff. Then Heathcliff ended up using the knife that was on Hindley to stab Hindley and also beat him up. This is prompted by Isabella telling Heathcliff to go die like a faithful dog on top of Catherine's grave, since Heathcliff made her believe that Catherine was the essence of his life. Heathcliff binds up Hindley, who was bleeding, and the next day Isabella is seated having her breakfast. Hindley is lying very sick in the parlour, and Heathcliff was beside the hearth. Hindley wished he could kill Heathcliff and doesn't mind dying in the process. But Isabella told him not to wish to die in Heathcliff's hands because Heathcliff had already killed one of them, Catherine. Because Catherine was happy in the Grange before the return of Heathcliff. And she said sometimes it's better to be hated than to be loved. Heathcliff, who has been sitting on the hearth, began to weep and asked Isabella to leave the room. But she refused and continued deriding him until he took a dinner knife and struck her beneath the ear. She pulled it out and struck Heathcliff, and it went very deep. Then she escaped to the Grange where she met Nellie. One day, Heathcliff met Nellie in the village and inquired where Isabella lives, but she didn't tell him. Heathcliff learnt about where she lives from other servants and a knowledge of his son. Isabella lived in South London where he had a son and named him Linton. Isabella's relationship with her brother was restored, though she never visited the Grange. Mr. Kenneth came to the Grange to meet Linton and informed Nellie of Hindley's death. Hindley died drinking in his room. Nellie convinced Linton to allow her visit to Wuthering Heights and help with the funeral. Heathcliff said he should be buried in a crossroad like a commoner, but Nellie refused and convinced him to allow a decent burial for Hindley. Hindley was buried and Heathcliff took over his son and all of Hindley's property, which he had mortgaged to Heathcliff to satisfy his gambling mania. Chapter 18. Kathy is the name of late Catherine's daughter and she's now 13 years old. As she's never allowed out of the Grange, the only building she has visited outside the Grange is Jimerton Chapel. Kathy became curious about the caves and mountains she sees from her window and wished to visit the place. Lily tried dissuading her, and when she told her father, he promised to let her go when she becomes older. But Kathy calculated her growth by months, and every month she keeps asking to be allowed to visit there, but keeps receiving the answer, not yet. Isabella, whose son is already 12, invited Linton to come visit her because she was ill and would like to put things in order before she dies. Linton did not hesitate. He stayed in London for 3 weeks, One day, Kathy asked Nelly to give her provisions for her horse and herself because she was going on a mission. Nelly did without knowing her real intentions. Kathy galloped out of the grange and didn't come for lunch. Nelly became aware that she isn't in the grange. She sent messengers to look for her and also went in search of her. At the end, she discovered she was in Wuthering Heights and insisted on a seat previously belonging to her mother. Nelly tried persuading her to follow her home immediately, but she refused and made Nelly chase her about, to her amusement and that of the Wuthering Heights housekeeper and Harrington. Then Nelly told her if she knew the house she was in, she would follow her immediately. Then she turned to Harrington and said it belonged to Harrington's father. Harrington says the owner of the house is not his father, and Catherine then thought he was a servant and addressed him as one, and Harrington got infuriated and used abusive words on her. Catherine was shocked because no one had ever used such words on her. And Cathy is only acquainted with lovely words. Nobody has ever used hateful words on her. When the housekeeper revealed that Harrington is Cathy's cousin, and she was badly offended to hear that such a clown is his cousin, she went home with Nelly at once. Nelly asked her not to narrate her experience to her father, else her father would sack her, and she agreed because she still wants Nelly around. Chapter 19. A letter arrived announcing the day of Mr. Linton's return and Isabella's death. And Cathy was overly excited. On the day of their return, Cathy wore a new dress and was anxiously looking out to see him. When their carriage arrived, Mr. Linton and Cathy bonded, and Nelly asked to take the boy, Isabella's son, named Linton, and be gentle with him as he's very weak and tired. Cathy looked at his cousin and felt pity on him. Mr. Linton told Cathy that her cousin is sick and should not be disturbed by too much talking, and should not expect him to play with her. Linton, that is Isabella's son, was asked not to grieve Cathy, who is already fond of her, by crying tonight. He agreed and requested he goes to bed. As he sat down, he began to cry. When Mr. Linton asked why he was crying, he said it's because he was uncomfortable in the seat. He was asked to go and sit on the couch. He went to the couch and lied down. Then Cathy brought her seat close to him and was drinking her tea silently. Later, she began caressing Linton and offered her tea. Linton was pleased and he smiled. In the night, Heathcliff sent Joseph to go fetch Linton, but Mr. Linton found it difficult to release Linton to him because Isabella wished he stayed with him, and the boy is also sickly. He asked Joseph to tell Heathcliff he will bring Linton to him tomorrow, because Linton is tired from the journey and has already gone to bed. When Mr. Joseph insisted on going to Wuthering Heights that night with Linton, he was ordered out of the grange. Chapter 20. At about 5:30 a.m., Nelly went to awaken Linton to prepare him for Wuthering Heights. Mr. Linton had already warned Nelly not to tell Cathy where she was taking Linton in order to avoid her from desiring to visit him in the Wuthering Heights. Nelly tried to persuade Linton to get up and follow her, but he refused until she invited Mr. Linton, who promised to visit him and assured him that his stay in Wuthering Heights would be short. He was finally convinced to follow Nelly. On their way to Wuthering Heights, he asked questions about Wuthering Heights and his father. Nelly told him he is second to the best building in the village and a good place, and that his father doesn't look like his uncle, but has black eyes and hair. Then he said he would never fancy him due to his black eyes and hair. When they got to Wuthering Heights, Linton didn't like his father, and Mr. Heathcliff referred him as a property he would guard in order to ensure he inherits Wuthering Heights and make Hareton and his children till the land of their father for wages. The servants brought food for Linton, but he refused to eat them. Then Nanny told them what he liked. Then Mr. Heathcliff, his father, ordered them to bring whatever he wants. Nelly urged Mr. Heathcliff to be kind to him. Then she managed to stealthily leave the room so that Linton does not notice, but he noticed as soon as the latch was dropped, and he cried, screaming, "Don't leave me." Chapter 21. Kathy woke up and hoped to see her cousin, only to be told he had been taken to his father, and this made her weep. But she was consoled with the promise of him coming back soon. When Lily met Wuthering Heights' housekeeper and inquired how Linton was doing, he was described as a faint-hearted creature. She described how much Mr. Heathcliff hates him and how Linton avoids him. Mr. Edgar, that is Mr. Linton, wished so much to see him, but can't because he never comes out to the village unaccompanied by Heathcliff. And Linton can't go to Wuthering Heights, that is Mr. Edgar can't go to Wuthering Heights. On Kathy's birthday, she took permission from her dad to have a ramble at the edge of the moors with Nellie, and she was permitted to be gone for just an hour. She dressed up and took off with Nellie. She went further than she was permitted to go, and on their way they met Heathcliff, who persuaded them to follow him to Wuthering Heights with the intention of making her see Linton and fall in love with him, and later get married so that Mr. Edgar, that is Kathy's father's property, will be taken over by him when Edgar dies. Nellie didn't like the idea but followed her mistress Kathy to Wuthering Heights. The two cousins saw each other and were very excited. Heathcliff asked Linton to take Kathy round Wuthering Heights, but he refused because he wasn't feeling strong to walk around. Then Heathcliff called Hareton to do it and asked him to behave gently. Hareton and Kathy's walk was very quiet as Hareton didn't say a word until Kathy asked him why they have an inscription on the door of Wuthering Heights. Then he said it's some damnable writing and can't read it. Then Linton appeared and told her that Hareton does not know his letters. Linton mocked him. Then Hareton left. Nellie and Kathy stayed at Wuthering Heights till afternoon as Nellie could not tear her apart from her cousin. Heathcliff encouraged her to visit Wuthering Heights as often as possible. As they left, Kathy was very excited and she gave a full and honest account of everything to his father against Heathcliff's advice not to disclose it to his father. Edgar was very disappointed at Nellie, but told Kathy to stay away from Mr. Heathcliff, and he also told her of how evil he is and his evil intentions. Kathy was surprised human beings could be such mean. She did not visit Wuthering Heights the next day as she promised Linton, but constantly wrote letters to Linton, who always replied. One day, Nellie discovered her and threatened to show the letters to her father, but Kathy persuaded her to burn everything. She did. The next morning, Nellie sent a letter through a boy that comes to buy milk to Linton, requesting that he stop sending letters to Kathy as she won't receive them. Chapter 22. Mr. Edgar contracted cold and was very sick. This disturbed Kathy a lot and she feared her father was going to die, but Nellie tried her best to discourage her from entertaining such thoughts. Then they saw a flower, which Kathy describes to be lonely like her, and wondered what will happen to her if her father dies, if her father and Nellie die. Nellie succeeded in making her dismiss such thoughts of her father dying from cold, and she confessed to Nellie that she loves her father more than she loves herself, and nothing in this world will make her behave in a way that will make her father sad because Nelly warned her to only do things to cheer her father up in order to help him recover quickly. As they rumbled near the mall, Kathy climbed up a wall to get fruits from the wide rows along the road. As she made to get the fruits, her cap fell on the other side of the wall, so she had to go down and get it. She was met by Mr. Heathcliff as she waited for Nelly to open the door, as she couldn't climb back to the top of the wall from the side her cap fell. Mr. Heathcliff convinced her that Linton is very sick and is going to die if she does not go and visit him. He equally threatened to show all of the letters Kathy had written to Linton to her father if she doesn't go. The next day, she went to Wuthering Heights with Nelly, and Mr. Heathcliff was not around during the period. Chapter 23. Nelly and Kathy entered the house and met Linton, who was alone in the living room and needing some help. The housekeeper who attends to him had gone out. When he saw the two, he was happy and asked Kathy to help her with water, which she did, and he was very grateful for it. The two young expressed how happy they were to see each other. Kathy said she wished Linton was her brother, and Linton said he wished Kathy was his wife. But Kathy is of the opinion that people hate their wives but not their siblings, and tells Linton of how Mr. Heathcliff hated his mother Isabella. But Linton counted her story and narrated his father's tale of Kathy's mom loving his father and hating Kathy's father. He even said that Mr. Heathcliff calls her father, that is Kathy's father, a sneaking fool. Kathy was very infuriated and said her own father calls him a wicked man, that is, calls Heathcliff a wicked man. He pushed Linton's seat and he fell. Linton began coughing and struggling for breath until Nelly and Kathy were able to restore him. Kathy felt very bad and Linton blamed her for all the misery he would face in the night and demanded that Kathy comes every day to nurse him because he had hurt him. Nelly was irritated by his selfishness and demanded they leave. Kathy refused to leave till 12 o'clock when Harriet came back for dinner. They galloped back to the Grange, and Nelly warned her not to attempt going to the Heights again, as it is not due to his love for her or Kathy's absence that is making Linton sick. But Kathy told Nelly that the Grange is not a prison place, when Nelly said she would change the locks to make sure she does not escape to the Wuthering Heights. When they got home, they drank some tea, and the next day, Nelly fell sick. Chapter 24. After 3 weeks, Nelly got better, and for the first time, she left her room. That evening, she asked Kathy to read for her, and she did. The following day, Nelly demanded the same favor. She did, but impatiently, and on the third day, she complained of headache and went to her room. Nelly thought it odd and went to ask her to come downstairs and relax in the sofa, instead of staying locked up in her room. Unfortunately, she didn't find her in her chamber or anywhere in the house, so she extinguished the light and waited for her in her room. When she came in and saw Nelly in her room, she was surprised and then confessed everything to Nelly. She narrates how she had been staying off to Wuthering Heights since she got ill, and her different encounters at Wuthering Heights. She narrates the many times she had arguments and quarrels with Linton, and how many times they stayed together happily. Also narrates how she mocked Harriet again for not being able to read. After her story, she begged Nelly not to tell her father, and Nelly said she would think about it. She went straight from Kathy's chamber to Mr. Edgar's chamber and narrated everything to him, and he was distressed and rebuked Kathy's behavior. He stopped her from wasting Wuthering Heights and promised to write Linton, telling him to visit the Grange any time he wants, but not to expect Kathy in Wuthering Heights again. Chapter 25. Nini encouraged Lockwood to try wooing Kathy to himself because she is a lovable person. Lockwood said he might love her but doubts if she might love him because he belongs to the busy world where he must return. He urges Nellie to continue with the story of the Wuthering Heights. She told Lockwood that Kathy obeyed her father's instruction of not visiting the Wuthering Heights but still loved Linton. Mr. Edgar begins his walk around the park with Kathy, which made her believe he was recovering. Mr. Edgar told Neely of his fear of what would happen to his property after he dies, since Kathy is falling in love with Heathcliff's son. He writes to Linton, expressing his desire to see him, and Linton replied that he could not come to the Grange because his father forbids him from going to the Grange and asked for another place to meet him. He could not express his suffering in Wuthering Heights in the letter because Heathcliff supervised every sentence of what he writes. Linton asked for an interview, else he will consider all of his uncle's promises empty, that is, Mr. Edgar's promises empty. Mr. Edgar kept part of his income for Kathy's fortune and hoped after she marries Linton may come back to the Grange, but didn't know that Linton was very sick. Kathy encouraged Edgar to allow her meet with Linton in the mall close to the Grange in June. Alright guys, I hope you're following the story. This is the third episode of our series on this novel. If you haven't watched the previous episodes and you want to watch them, please let me know in the comment section so I can give you the link. This novel is a 34 chapter novel, and in the next episode I'll be able to complete the remaining parts. Please stay tuned by subscribing to the channel, clicking on the like button and turning on the notification bell so that once I upload the remaining chapters, you'll be the first person to be notified. Thank you very much for watching and see you very soon in another video. Bye bye.